Oh, no, I've got to push the button. Hang on. Got it. I have to move I've just set this up. It's precariously balanced on a bucket. A medieval bucket, mind you. Hopefully that'll... Salvation in medieval times. It's a good one, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
You know, if you were back in the day, because I'm a Franciscan in this robe, and St. Francis was really the first appearance in modern Christendom where the actual scriptures or the actual teachings of Jesus were valued and practiced. And I don't want to get into the history of it all, but you could buy through the Catholic Church, they had everybody so wound up, you could buy a bishophood if you were wealthy enough, and a bishophood gave you entitlement to have so many holy soldiers and guards, I think they were called guards, and to officiate all sorts of things where you would make lots and lots of lovely money. And you could even sell indulgences to the common people, which was a little bit of paper saying that you'd been good and you'd done penance and all this sort of stuff. And you could buy that, and that was your ticket into heaven. And then St. Francis came along and sort of said, now, what the hell's going on here? And went to visit the Pope. And the Pope, of course, kissed his feet, as we know now through history, and blessed him for being perhaps the only person in the entire Vatican who was actually practicing the teachings of Christ as they were meant to be taught. And then, of course, the Pope went on to, I can't remember which Pope it was, 9th or 10th, anyway, and then the Pope went on to continue his luxurious lifestyle of pampered lifestyle, and St. Francis, of course, went off to do what he did. But nowadays, thankfully, things are slightly different. So the idea of give up the world, and I kind of want to stick with St. Francis maybe because it is a very good example. St. Francis was a huge influence. Have any of you guys ever seen the recreation they did of his life, the movie?
Yeah.
Brother, Sun, Sister Moon.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
That's so
really
beautiful. Good. I mean, the acting's a little bit woody, but like the storyline's really, really true. Yeah. So, and I read the articles of Catholic Association, I think it's called, the articles of sainthood, which to become a saint, you have to perform 3 verified miracles by the Catholic Church. And I think the 3rd one for St. Francis was receiving the wounds of the stigmata, of which eventually is what he died from, but or laid his vessel aside from. But they were dark times. It's like, but the work is the same, you know, like the work and the style of the work is the same. The teaching of salvation hasn't changed since the days of Jesus, or even since the days of Zoroaster, really. But give up the world and follow me is still the proclamation, I suppose, you know, or the declaration that you are abiding by. And of course, nowadays we know that it's not necessarily a physical giving up of the world, although if you still want to do that, go ahead. But it's a psychic giving up of the world, where the meaning that I've given everything, and it's the one meaning for all things, but the meaning that I've given everything, I'm now reclaiming it, or I'm accepting atonement for it. I'm taking it back through the process of what we call healing or forgiveness. And so when I look at the entirety of the world, it's very easy to become, if you and this is something I don't get, right? So if you were a news journalist, say, and you were on the front line of all the news every night for years and years, and you had a whole career as a news journalist, surely it would destroy you. That would be my thinking. You would have to have a stony heart not to be affected by reporting on all the drama and the, you know, so the vetting process for becoming a journalist must be quite rugged. But you never see like anchormen or anchor women or whatever, like reading those headlines and having a mental breakdown. But I know that any one of us could probably go through those nightly news headlines and feel a certain way about it, you know, like probably crushed to the soul, some of the things. And I've been watching the outpouring of and appeals for help from Maui recently, and it took me back to my time when, as a young man, I was protesting the logging of old-growth forests in my area, and we were chaining ourselves to trees and doing stuff like that and having marches, and which we were successful at. And eventually I decided I didn't really want to live my life as a protester or a greenie or anything like that, but I didn't know what to do with the emotionality of life that kept presenting itself to me in a seemingly hopeless fashion. I didn't have the luxury of being able to cloister myself away or put myself away behind luxurious facades, you know, and like they did with the Buddha. You know, Buddha's parents tried to hide him from the suffering of the world and keep him sort of locked away until finally he sort of had enough of that. But I was rather, I wouldn't say I was poor, but I was rather living on the meager end of things when I was a young man. And so I had a very wide community network. And of course, in any community network, you're constantly bombarded with the needs of the community. And it just drove me to a place where I couldn't do it anymore. And I ran off and bought myself a house in the boonies, I think American people say, don't you? The boonies, is that or in the outback? It wasn't, well, not in the outback, but in the hills. So, and the rest is history. But the emotionality of life is something that, and it's difficult at first. You know, it's something that needs to be embraced. Sure, it's false. Sure, it's driven by ego. Sure, it's all of these things. But it doesn't do any good to just say, oh, well, I don't have to feel a certain way about something, because the script for my experience in the world was written before I came, including every experience, emotional or otherwise, that I'm going to have, which means that my everyday, my 9 to 5 experience, I hope everybody in this group is familiar with the idea that free will's an illusion, so we don't have to go through all of that. But the everyday experience of, let's say, the garden variety human being is one that's very emotional and very, and of course, emotions come from our thoughts that we've given meaning, and thoughts are not without effects. Cause and effect relationship, which is the internal external world relationship, is exactly the same thing. But of course, because the nature of the beast is denial, the nature of the beast is denial of sovereignty, of creatorship, and denial of responsibility for the denial of that. So I'm in denial of my denial, right? The nature then of salvation is not to deny the denial. Right? It's like you accept denial, but don't deny you're in denial. And I could probably throw another denial in there for the individual dream. But so I often say to people who, like I had, Michelle's not here with us or anything, but Michelle came to me in the very early onset of her beginning with A Course in Miracles, and she was destitute. She said, I feel dead inside. I feel empty. I've got nothing to give. I feel completely like devoid of any kind of emotional or what would you call it, loving sense of self. She was basically an empty husk. That's how she described herself. And she'd been someone who'd been working in the same job day in, day out forever and ever, and had been worn down, as the world does, if you have a little resilience. And God's children don't have that resilience for dealing with the world, because it's not our natural environment. You know, and eventually, one after the other, some by fire and some by flood, we find ourselves in church or in a Zoom meeting like this, or in some kind of place with our heart on our sleeve, begging for understanding and begging for some kind of way to make sense of our world. And of course, the only way to make sense of it is to let go of the sense that we think it makes, even in the negative, even in the idea that it's not a nice place. That's kind of like for granted. But it's funny, I was at because we're in the, what do you call this thing, Joe? The medieval reenactment. Joe and I, for anyone who doesn't know, Joe and I are up in the mountain and we're attending a medieval reenactment festival. And we got roped into this, I guess, or well, probably willingly, but we got under the auspices of getting out of your comfort zone. So, and a lot of our Zoom meetings have been focused around getting out of your comfort zone. And last night, we were down attending the closing ceremony for the day. It starts again at 9 o'clock today, but we were down attending the closing business of the thing, and we were drinking mead with the Vikings and the Viking encampment. The Viking encampment is pretty much the only thing that's medieval about it, apart from some of the arts and crafts and some of the other things that are going on down there. And we were drinking mead and everything. And Joe left to come home to bed about an hour before me. I was trying to get away. I was interested in staying for a little bit, but when it came time to get away, I bumped into a fellow called Sir Robert. Sir Robert was the only, what would you call them, Tudor knight, Catharian knight, whatever they are, the only crusader from the first Crusades, representing the entire Crusades on his own down there. And Sir Robert was completely drunk and smashed off his head and stoned off marijuana and everything like that. And I'm having some meads with Sir Robert, and he starts popping out about, he leans into me and he goes, "You know, this is all just a dream, don't you?" And Sir Robert's almost 90 years old. Sir Robert's, I think, 89 or 87 or something. And he looks like much like I do now, but in a much worse condition and a more battled condition. And he starts telling me how it's all just an illusion. He said, or a dream. He says, you can call it a dream, whatever you want. And so I just shut up from whatever I was talking about with him about medieval stuff. And I was listening, right? I was just started listening. And I thought, here we go. This is why I'm here. Like, this is like I've been here all day. I got an awful sunstroke in the morning, and I missed the battling in the afternoon because I was laying down. But you can probably see my nose is a bit red and my face is burnt from the sun. But anyway, so I'm going on and on with Sir Robert, and Sir Robert's telling me about all sorts of things and backtracking into other stories and different things. And I'm grateful for the reminder that he gave me, and I'm just waiting to see if there's any opportunity for us to join in something. But because I think of the liquor and the herbs and things like that, that it didn't eventuate, and Sir Robert had to wander over and sit by the fire, and I took my opportunity to take my leave and come home. But so there's a bit of residue of the mead in my brain this morning, if you want to put it that way. And the sunstroke. But I think such it was in medieval times. But getting back to the getting back to the nature of transformation and the nature of salvation, the importance of feeling, the importance of allowing oneself to go into the places where denial hides. And it's very easy to conceptually understand the nature of denial, because you only have to pick up A Course in Miracles and read how beautiful a perfectly healed mind is, especially if you're reading the chapter of the Saviour's vision. You can't avoid but realize and recognize how out of sync your own way of thinking and seeing is compared to it. But to go, because this is a journey into fear, to go into the darkness with the Holy Spirit, to go into the darkness with that light within, to expose and to unhide all that has been hidden, is a journey that unlocks many chests, which are like Pandora's box in a way. Once you open them, the evils that come out and the things that come out are all emotionally based. You cannot not look at the things that you've encountered in, let's say, many, many lifetimes, or many, many ideas of lifetimes would probably be better, since it's all an illusion. But through the idea of lifetimes, you cannot not encounter that which you have denied within the framework of the denial. Every lie that you've told, every effort you've made to hide something or deceive someone, and all of these sorts of things, even through honest ignorance. It's very easy to get caught up in the house of falling cards of things, that where all of a sudden your life seems out of control and you don't know how to deal with it. And so you push it away and you deny what it is that seems to be presented to you or whatever, and you look for a way out, right? That's a common human trait, is to look for a way out of their situation if they don't like it, rather than to be still and allow it to be reorchestrated or healed through the presence of God, which is within, and the activity of God, which is within, and of course through the Holy Spirit, that activity is healing. And so this journey is a very emotional one, especially at the very beginning. And one of the things I love from the text, and it really surprised me when I read it, is where Jesus is talking to Helen, and or it might have been to Bill, but he said how he wept at the persecution of the Jews. Right now, I don't really know where to go with that. Right, in my own understanding, and having had several experiences of being outside of the world and outside of my body and all of this sort of stuff, the prime experience, of course, being the illumination of my mind, where there was no emotionality about it whatsoever. It was just a state of pure being, or a state of I am. But in a couple of the other experiences, which are all concurrent with the teaching of the Course and all sort of made sense of my own passage, there was some kind of emotional sense of self, some kind of sense of an association of not really the body as I know it now, but an ethereal body, or a less dense light body. I don't really know how to talk about it, but in one of those, I still seemed to have this fleshy carcass, but it didn't have weight and it didn't have volume or anything like that. It was almost as if it was a projection or a digital thing. You know, it was still me. And my takeaway from that experience was that I was given, or I was presented, or had that experience with that image of my body, so that I wouldn't feel uncomfortable and wouldn't feel afraid. But there was some kind of attachment still to it. And of course, if you find yourself on Earth with a body, with the use of one of these avatars, it can only be maintained by ego, right? The Holy Spirit has no use for it once it's learning passage is done, and it will be laid aside, and you'll be told exactly when that is. So until that day, the work is the constant searching out. Right now, so there's two facets to the work. The work is vigilance for inner peace, which will give you a total awareness of anything that disturbs that state of mind in you. Right, so we're learning through the workbook of the course to find peace within and to be able to maintain that. And the more confrontation we make, or the more atonement that we are willing to take on board in our individual associations, relationships, etc., the greater the depth of peace will become, and the easier it will be to maintain it. And you will find that you suddenly no longer react to the same old things that you once reacted to, and you'll probably walk happily and with great surprise down the street to realize that. With and I'm thinking of Tina's experience with the mice or the rats. Remember when we first met and you had the although that one mouse.
Well, that one mouse, he came into my room. That's what was really trippy about it. Like before I would go out into the world, and the rats would jump out whenever I went out. And I was like, wow, are you kidding me? Now it's going to not just be in my house, but come into my room.
Right.
Smaller, but closer.
all things sacred and blessed, all creatures great and small.
You've got bats.
Right. But all of these things have emotional responses. So the symbols that we see around ourselves outside are literally the manifestation of what they symbolize to us in our own thinking. Right. So now they can't exist without an emotional property, if I call it that. Right. The moment that you confront the belief in the reality of the symbology that seems to be around you, and you'll know when that is, or when you're to do that, because you'll be triggered, you'll lose your sense of inner peace, something will occur, right? In that moment, if you can catch it in that moment, that is the best time, because it's authentic, right? That is the best time to get in touch with the emotional package that symbol contains in your thinking. Right, so if two people, let's say, were to see, and I know I've used this analogy before, but it's a pretty good one. If you were to go to Japan and you didn't speak Japanese, for example, and you saw two people having a conversation in Japanese and you didn't speak Japanese, you wouldn't know if they were arguing or if they were telling each other that they loved each other. Right? You would just hear this yak tung 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 ta 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 ta. And Asian people usually speak very loud and apparently seemingly very fast, and can often be misconstrued for an argument. And if you've ever seen two Chinamen trying to make a deal on something, there's a lot of this and a lot of with the hands, and like it's a whole thing. That symbology, that expression, that picturing that you're seeing outside of yourself isn't outside of yourself. It's in your own thinking, because it's only your own thoughts that tell you what it is you think you're seeing. Right? Now, for a very academic mind, it might be more difficult to get in touch with the emotional load that represents. Right? For a more creative mind or an artistic mind, usually it's the opposite way. The emotions usually precede the recognition of what's going on. We feel something in our chest, and it's just like, what's going on there? And then we stop to think about it and analyze it. But for the more academic mind, the analysis usually comes first. And then because of that, because the mind is already functioning, the idea of denial, and you got to remember the old programming is of denial. The old idea of denial automatically dismisses it, right? Or can automatically dismiss it. Whereas the creative being, or the one with the more creative mindset, You feel it in your heart. You can't dismiss that. You can't tell yourself you didn't feel a certain way about it. You can lie to yourself and try to deceive yourself that you did, but you know for a fact that you didn't. You felt it. You had an experience with it, and you connected with it on some level, albeit in the ego framework. And that's exactly where we do the work. Right? So we had, who was it we used to call the secretary in our group? That elder lady that, no, not you. Yeah, you know who I'm talking about.
Yeah. Vivian.
And who was it?
Vivian.
Vivian had a very academic mind. Vivian had worked in academia her whole life as a cleric or a secretary or some kind of thing, and found it extremely difficult to connect with her, because in this whole process we're bringing heart and mind together. She found it very difficult to connect with her emotional state regarding things she was going through. It's not that it's impossible, but it would require a miracle, right? So don't limit, in that regard, don't limit the miracle to what it's capable of. The whole idea that God calls upon my forgiveness every moment of the day to save me is part and parcel with the idea also that I'm entitled to miracles, because that's the only way that I can get through this. I'm not getting out of my transformation without a miracle. Right? I would have described myself in some senses with certain things, like when my first, you know, when you're a teenager or something, when you're very young and you have your first love and that puppy love thing, and that means a whole lot, and you invest a whole lot of yourself into what that means to you, and you try to protect it and defend it as all those ideas in your mind, and no one else is allowed into that thing because it's somehow sacred and fulfills you and all of this stuff. And I remember at the collapse of my very first love, I shut down. I didn't know what to do with how I felt about it, and I shut down. I became very sheltered away from myself, from my emotions. And it took a long, long time before I was willing to open up again and get hurt again and again and again. But that's essential. It's necessary. If there's still a part of me within that can still be hurt, I have to have it exposed, because God is my protector and my redeemer and everything like that, not me and not my own ability to protect and redeem and defend myself. Right? I'm perfectly capable of walking defenseless through the world because I'm sustained by the love of God. But until that becomes the modus operandi of how it is that you see the world and yourself within it, the old way of thinking that you have to defend yourself from the ills of the world is always going to be there in one form or another. And probably it's going to exist in that part of your mind, if you want to call it the subconscious, where you're unaware of it. Sometimes you don't see things until retrospect, and you look back and you be like, holy shit, I did make a decision to deny that. Right? And I did make a decision not to allow myself to feel how I wanted to feel or how I was feeling there. And of course, many people sadly sedate themselves with alcohol and drugs and never actually feel anything. And they do that specifically so they don't have to feel, because the existential anxiety associated with the totality of feeling is literally the call to awaken. And the subliminal programming of ego is the denial of the call to awaken. You'll do anything, right? You'll do anything to maintain some kind of security around the idea of not awakening, including reading A Course in Miracles or pursuing some kind of spiritual good. You know? So it's like I never trust myself. I always keep my finger on my nose here. And it's like, I'm not going to trust a damn thing that goes on in my head, because there's nothing here that can tell me the meaning of life. Nothing. Every thought I have about making an appeal to God through Jesus Christ or through the Holy Spirit or whatever, I'm not even going to trust that. Every prayer is tainted with the muddy waters of ego in this place. Right? which is why I need a miracle. My prayers, like I love the bit in the Course where Jesus says, I stand halfway between God and man in case your prayers fail temporarily. The only reason our prayers fail temporarily is because we're not in touch with the rocket fuel that enables them to go all the way, you know, to make a total connection. Our whole life is practiced in denial. Our whole experience on earth is practiced in denial. And it accommodates us and goes with us and follows us around all the way, right up until the point of our illumination. The only true point of being 101% open-minded is in your own illumination. In every other aspect or every other memory or every other idea about yourself, there is only ever falsity. And that may be a bitter pill to swallow for some, but it's the truth. God's not keeping you from salvation, you are. God's not holding back on anything. Your salvation is here and now. Your Father is literally calling to you saying, here, take this from me. Here's your liberation from that shitty little place that you think you're in and the particulars that you think you're circumscribed by. And all you're ever doing is saying, I'll think about that. Not today, Lord, but I'll think about that. But I'll practice taking it from you. I'll practice accepting salvation. I used to have friends who went to church, and by the mere act of going to church, they just concluded that they'd found God. And I couldn't tell them that wasn't the case. You know, you can say that you found a path to God, or you found a way, you know, which is like Jesus, the way, the truth, and etc. But to find God is to know God. To find God is to experience oneself as that, as the divine. It's part of you, it's within you now, and it's calling to you to say yes to it. It's like the idea of seek the truth and it will set you free. It's like, isn't that what you want? But the barricades and the blocks to realizing why it is that you're not honest in your prayer when you say you want it, that's the work we're doing. That's the whole reason we have a copy of A Course in Miracles with 365 lessons, so we can find our blocks to love's awareness within us. Not love's awareness as a concept, love's awareness as an experience. Jesus says in the Course, a universal experience is not only possible, it's necessary. It's necessary. You have to have the experience. Some have it when they lay the body down afterwards. Some have it through this course, and some have it in ways that, you know, by the grace of God. For me, it was through the dark night of the soul, and I wouldn't wish that upon anybody, but you have to have the experience, and there's nothing stopping you from having it now. But for the fact that you don't want it. And I've had people say to me, I do want it, I do want it, and they're red in the face. I want it, I really want the experience. And it's like, well, either God is true or you're true. Which one do you think is going to be the, you know, the more likely there? So we do the work. We look for the blocks and we find them. And every time your peace of mind is disturbed by anything, and you have to allow yourself to be vulnerable and open to being disturbed. It's no good to live in a comfort zone. It's no good to try and control everything so you don't have to feel anything. You have to allow yourself to feel. It's not nice. Feeling some of the emotions that we have as this human critter, it's not nice sometimes. But now we have true purpose. Now we have a reason for why we want to feel those things. Now we have a reason for why we want to expose the dark things that are hidden within. Those dark places in the valley of the shadow of death. And once you begin to walk that valley, There is no way out but to keep going. And all of us are somewhere within that valley. So there's great rejoicing, there's great cause for gladness and for joy because salvation has been given to you. And it's easy when you read the course, it's easy just to read the parts that reflect that. And this is where mind in denial, Ted used to say to us all the time, never underestimate mind in denial. Right? The ego is suspicious, vicious, cunning, and baffling. And you can't try to work it out because that's what ego is. You simply have the facilities within through the principles of the course to be vigilant and aware. Initially for your own processing and also for your relationship with all things, which is holiness. With all living things, including the little mouse that comes into your bedroom. You know, some people have mice as pets and keep them in a cage and stuff. And I might get you a pet mouse, Tina, and you can that'll push your comfort zone. See what that brings up. Speaking. Because we're in a medieval themed thing. In medieval days, one of the tortures, right? Because if you were bad, they would just torture the shit out of you. They would put an upturned bucket of rats on your stomach.
I've seen that movie.
You've seen that? And then hot coals on the top, and the rats would eat down through your intestines to get away from the hot coals. You would literally be eaten alive. It's like if you think that you're separate from that idea, it's like, right? So here's the thing. Imagine being eaten alive by rats under a bucket. Right? Now, I could just as easily say, imagine having your foot run over in the street by a streetcar and, crossing the road when you shouldn't have or something. Everybody knows or can have an imagination or an idea of what that might be like. It would be horrific. Right? Conceptually, you can get it. But to feel the emotionality of it, to bring thought, to bring heart and mind together, to bring those two things together, it's like, all right, well, I can simply offer my thinking to the Holy Spirit, which is all Jesus is asking me to do. Right? If I cannot find the emotionality, I can simply offer my thinking and it can be healed from there, because thought and cause and effect aren't separate. Right? But if I can find the emotional package, it's much quicker. Right? Now, that's to do with when we draw our circle and we stand in our circle, or we stand in prayer and we ask the Holy Spirit for help. Right? And we stand there until we feel something. We stand there until we feel the upwelling and the uprising of the emotional state of that existential anxiety. Right? A lot of people in the world are on medication for anxiety because they don't know what it's about. They don't understand that it's all existential. They tend to displace the reason for their anxiety on people's situations and things out there. And some people will even say, I don't know why I'm anxious. It just comes and goes. Which is why ideas are increased by sharing and having this technology, learning to master your emotional states, learning to become the master of your own thinking and your own, therefore, being and your own embodied state, even on earth, is incredibly valuable. Of course, nobody's taught that in school. So when we draw our circle in the sand, like Jesus did in the desert, when we draw our healing circle and we stand in there, that circle's a sacred place. Right? It's the same thing if you go to church. You give church the ascribing of being a sacred place, and you go there specifically for one purpose, to be devotional and to be healed and to seek penance and all that sort of stuff. It's the same thing we do in our circle. We imagine ourselves a circle, we step within it in our own thinking, and that circle only has the purpose of healing. That's it. And we stay there until what it is that's confronting us comes up. It's always easier to do it in the moment, but if you do it in retrospect, so be it. But just be aware that if you're doing it in retrospect, the ego would have already pushed down all the emotionals back down into the subconscious with all the other crap. Right? And it takes a minute. Sometimes you've got to stand there. Sometimes you've got to wait there. I remember going down to the beach. I can't remember the situation it was about, but I remember that my prayers weren't honest. I'd been praying and asking for help from Jesus to heal my mind about a certain situation. This was back when I was attending the center, and nothing was changing. And I realized that the integrity that I was putting into my prayer was more lip service than heartfelt integrity. And so I went down to the beach across the road one night, and I've done this several times, and I drew my circle in the sand, literally. And I sat there cross-legged until my legs went numb and dead with pins and needles. And I felt like that I was actually putting some kind of integrity into it because I was experiencing this pain in association. And you don't have to do that, of course, but for me, it was the only way I felt I was even slightly honest about my appeal. You know, it was the only way I could be sure that I, you know, and people do all sorts of things, flagellation and all sorts of stuff, to undergo pilgrimages and all sorts of things to try and drive up that honesty. Because even my own honesty is dishonest. Right? It's like when Jesus says it's not what you put into your body that can poison you, but every word that proceeds out of it. It's like every word that proceeds out of it. Not just some of those words, every word. Because love has no spoken language. Love is our natural state. The spoken language in symbols and representing other things and representing concepts that we tie together to make associative themes, all of that is denial, the whole lot of it. Which is why sometimes you'll have, especially Buddhists, will enter into long periods of sustained silence and refuse to talk. Not that that does any good. It doesn't help because no healing happens. It's just like a kid throwing a tantrum. No, I'm just going to enter into this, sit in this cave for 10 years and not talk to anybody. But you've got to be willing to be vulnerable. You've got to be willing to be open, to feel your human path, to allow it to affect you, to be buffeted by the winds of time and change, to say yes to things that are put on offer, like going to medieval festivals, and to get out of those comfort zones so that you can find where it is your denial lays. Right? It's hidden. Where's Francois? Oh, he's gone.
South Africa.
Kevin. Oh, no, I mean, he's not in the meeting.
Yeah, South Africa. Power went off.
Oh, he has no electricity.
Yeah, power. Yeah, South Africa. They shut it off.
Oh, yeah. I think they're about to have a big uprising there, something, or a war. Oh. I don't know where in South. I mean, it's 200 countries or something in Africa, but so one of the things that in our last meeting, and I've been thinking about this, Kevin, when I said to you about doing your declaration, and you couldn't find anything, right? That's not surprising, because the nature of the beast is denial, and the idea then of the conflict in the two states. I seem to still find myself here, but can't find any emotional response or any upwelling of passion for making a declaration or whatever it was you said to me. I forget the exact words. It's like, that's a really good example of it. It's the same with Michelle. There is always an emotional state. It's what the human being is, right? Even though we find ourselves in an experience of love, God placed within us a spark of reality. That spark of reality fuels the ego, right? The ego draws its power from, because God is source. God, everything comes from God. There's not another source that ego gets its, it's like into eternity where all is one, crept a tiny mad idea. at which the Son of God remembered not to laugh. But that spark is still within. All right. What we use it for is up to us. That's the only part of free will that makes any sense. The only part of free will that you can actually apply to. You have the power of decision. So, and I've been through many rites of passage, I suppose, if you want to call them that, many relationships with things through doing this workbook of this course, where I couldn't feel a certain way about anything. I couldn't, it's exactly the same as like Kevin with our decoration last week. I couldn't find anything. I had nothing, right? But I knew that that was a lie in me. I knew that there would be something there, but that it was so heavily shielded that I wasn't willing to, and this is just for my own thing, and the story about poor old Heaven at the swimming pool. I think, Tina, you know that one. I've told it a few times. I was forced. I could not avoid it. I had to get out of my comfort zone. I knew that. And I was forced into confronting how I felt about this particular person, even though I was absolutely convinced that I didn't feel a particular way about it, and I couldn't find anything there. But it just kept niggling away, niggling, and then it was like a mighty damn wall that broke, and boom, the healing occurred. Literally, the healing occurred. So the idea that I'm fully participating with my salvation, the idea that I'm giving my all to it, is what I have to look at. Am I really walking with Jesus? When Jesus says to me, give up the world and follow me, am I following? Or am I just saying the words? And you'll find parts in your transformation where you're just saying the words, and you'll find parts in your transformation where you're like, hot damn, I really did that. I really forgave something, and you'll know it because you'll feel so good about it. You'll feel a sense of total gratitude to God and to the person, whoever it was, or the situation that enabled you to find within the denial of love and be forgiving. That is our purpose on earth, to be forgiving. Man is forgiving. Every footstep, every encounter, every relationship, the holy instant isn't blazing in front of you with every encounter you make, because it's shielded, it's hidden by the veil of illusion, the idea of my brother is a body. But when I walk in vulnerability, when I walk in defenselessness, and allow myself to be shown, allow myself to be taught what it is that my brother is, then the opportunity, or that, it's like with Sir Robert last night. I was just, it's so funny. I was waiting. It was like I've had so many of these moments, and usually they pan out with this kind of like, whoa, and there's a whole joining thing that happens. And I was waiting for this moment. And one of the funny things that I remember was Ted. Have you guys seen the movie? It's a Harrison Ford one where he finds the goblet, the chalice, the Holy Grail. You've seen that movie? And he goes through all of the perils, right? So symbolically, if you were to look at that movie to find the Holy Grail, it's the analogy of somebody seeking salvation, right? And so Harrison Ford has to go through dangers and traps and things, and through a hidden tomb and secret passageways with spears and everything. Finally, he gets to the, what would you call it, the grotto or whatever. And there's a Templar knight standing there guarding the chalices, and there's an array of about 50 different cups. And the guardian knight who's standing there with his sword, his duty is to kill him if he chooses the wrong cup, right? If he chooses the right cup, then Harrison Ford takes his place as the guardian of the chalice. And that's his honor-bound duty as serving God. And Harrison Ford says to him, no, I'm not here for that. I've come to get the chalice because there's other people coming after me who intend to use it for evil purposes. So I've come to secure it away. They know where it is too. And Ted used to say, there's always one of these old guardians in your dream. There's one of these old things. And Sir Robert was like that last night. You know, Sir Robert was guarding this kind of wisdom of a lifetime of looking into the esoteric arts and things. But of course, he was too drunk to impart any kind of thing. And I realized it's like, no, not this time, Lord. You know, like sometimes the opportunities don't present. You know, it's like, or maybe that was the opportunity that I just got the reminder that I'm dreaming. You know, so. But the holy instant comes through in a moment of total defenselessness. It's like when I heard him say to me, this is just a dream, you know, this is all an illusion, right? I shut up straight away. I stepped right back in my own consciousness. I stepped right back and I waited for the moment of the holy instant to occur, thinking, this is going to be awesome. And of course, nothing happened because he just kept blah, 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 like that. And rambling on with his old Sir Robertness. So, but it's important to be defenseless, right? I can't reach through the screen and pinpoint to each of you guys where it is your blocks are. You're already aware of them because you're the ones that have put them into place, right? And it doesn't matter how much reading you do, doesn't matter how many meditations you do, how many groups you attend or anything like that, you will not proceed forward until you remove the block that's in front of you now. You'll make no advance in the journey of your soul until you remove the blocks that's in front of you now. And if you think there's not a block in front of you now, you're in denial. Because God is always calling, always. When you remove the last block, it's like this whole practice is about becoming revelation ready. That might sound like a big thing, you know, it might sound like a huge kind of something that happens perhaps only in biblical times, or, you know, we tend to, I mean, in the circles that when I was living down in Byron Bay, in the circles that I traveled in down around there, it was a common thing. People would often tell me of their experiences and we'd have all kinds of discussions. I had a friend of mine the other day she lives in Sweden, I think, up in the Nordic lands, and she's been a Course in Miracles student for 10 years. And initially when she came to the course, we had a lot of back and forth, and I helped her to get grounded in the principles of the course, and she sort of was giving me the opportunity to hear what I needed to learn at the same time. It's always reciprocal. And I haven't really heard much from her over the last 6 or 7 years. And then like 2 or 3 days ago, I get a message from her that she's hearing the voice, right? She's hearing a voice. It's not her own voice inside. It's a female. She calls it a female voice. In my own journeying, I've heard both male and female. And then of latter times, a voice that I couldn't really say if it was male or female. It's impossible, just like a generic kind of voice. But she's hearing a female voice at the moment. And she's seeing, I'm not a person that has anything to do with numerology, but I'm aware of it. And I kind of get a bit of the idea behind it. But she's seeing things. She sees 11:11 and all those sorts of things, and 2:22. And my daughter was born at 4:44 a.m. And you think I can't not see that everywhere I go? So, but it's the same thing. If you buy a yellow car, you'll see a yellow car. The mind makes something there. But anyway, under the auspices of salvation and healing, she's seeing all these numbers. She's hearing a voice, which is giving her some guidance, which is turning out to be correct and relevant and useful to her. And she asked, "Who are you?" And the voice replied to her, "I am 60. Now, apparently in numerology, 60 is a guardian number. So she has a guardian with her. And yesterday at the medieval thing, I had a brief encounter with a palm reader down there. There's all sorts of esoteric kind of things represented. I had a palm. I was supposed to actually go and have my palm read. And, it hasn't happened twice now with this thing. But anyway, this person, the palm reader, told me that 60 is a very good number, and it's something to do with a divine relationship, higher to lower, which of course it would be. I mean, if she was reading the course, but I thought it was just interesting that her guidance would show up through numbers and things like that. But of course, the nature of guidance is that it's always changing. There's no point in being guided through to one thing and then just to be left there. There's always the next and the next and the next. And in the course, there are 4 main blocks, 4 main obstacles to peace. Right? The desire to get rid of it, the belief the body is valuable for what it can offer, the fear of God, and the fear of love. Those are the 4 obstacles to peace. And whether you start with the first one or whatever, or the second one or the third one or the last one, you will recognize directly in front of you in your own heart and mind, you will recognize your association with one or other of those blocks, or perhaps all of them, in every relationship that you have. If you're vulnerable, if you're open to it, if you're willing to be defenseless. And it's entirely possible to defend yourself with a load of spiritual mumbo jumbo. You can use the course as a weapon against yourself and tell yourself that you're involved in something spiritual while actually you're in complete denial of it. A lot of people do that with the Bible. It's as simple as practice what you preach. So I think, Tina, can we do the lesson in my defenselessness? What is that? Is that in the 100s, 160 or something?
150, I think 150.
Yeah.
No. 153.
You want to dig that out of the medieval vault of...
There's 135. That's one of them. And then 150 something. I think it's 153.
153. That's
the one. 153. Yeah, so it's 135 and 153, those 2.
Right, good. So... Who else is seemingly facing some kind of block? Anyone? I know Joe's not. Joe's very much outside of her comfort zone. Joe said to me yesterday, thank you for bringing me up here to this medieval thing, because I'm really out of my comfort zone. So, which is good. Joe, and you know what? You know the funny thing, Joe?
What?
Right. So the whole process of allowing yourself to fall with grace into the next situation that's going to present you an opportunity for healing is the application of 3 words: yes, wow, and thank you. Right. So, and like yesterday when we had the group photograph taken, and I'll see if I can get a copy of that photo, and I said to you, come on, get in the photo, and you had no. There was a vehement kind of a no about that, right? I would, if that was me, I would be looking at that as opportunity for healing. What is it there that I'm resisting, right? It can only be love, because God is everything, right? And in my yes is the receipt of that love. In my yes is the awareness of that love. It may look like for a moment I have to undergo the release of some of my trepidation and fear and everything about actually getting into the group photograph or whatever. But that's the actual photograph of things is only a symbolic representation of the action of my mind. I'm going from the no to the yes. I'm saying yes to love, yes to God, yes to me. And I know you're only fairly new in this whole process, but it's like, let's not waste any opportunities to look at what's going on. And a good solid no like you gave me yesterday is fantastic. I love that. It's juicy. when you start to see things as opportunities, you know, you start to see it's like, oh, damn, I had resistance to that. It's like, well, that's going to come around again, because what you resist persists, and a lesson repeats until it is learned. I'm just putting on my socks. I bought some thick socks. I knew it'd be cold up here, but I'm actually starting to get quite chilly in my tin truck. Thinking on my body again. So yes, wow, and thank you is the three responses to anything, right? If you cannot say, right, and this is with the understanding that my path is laid down by the Holy Spirit, right? The Holy Spirit knows better than I do what's in my own good. I just have to be willing to trust him with that when it seems to show up that I don't want to take that next step, or I don't want to say yes or wow or thank you. And yes, wow, and thank you is the only true responses you can have to anything. If you can't say yes, wow, and thank you to any given situation, it's because somewhere inside there is still a restriction or a constriction or a denial going on of the willingness to join and to say yes to the universe, because that's what you're actually saying yes to. But it has to be given out in little offerings, like joining in a photograph, or doing a declaration, or anything like that. And each of you will be presented with opportunities to say yes. Right? Now, obviously, I'm not going to tell you to say yes in the face of imminent danger or anything like that. You have your own internal guidance that will give you a clear indication of how that yes should look. Right? So if a person who's heavily addicted to drugs asks you for money, it's very unlikely that you're going to want to say yes. But it is more likely that you would be willing to buy them some food or something like that with that money, which would be better in their, you know, to help them, or whatever. But it would always be first that I would clear away my story about what I think was going on in the first place, so that I could be guided. And that's the same thing with each of you. Right? It's like, I don't know what this is. I don't know why this person's asking for money. I don't feel good about giving them money because they're probably just going to go and buy drugs. But I'm willing to say yes. The situation is asking me to say yes. Right? So don't judge the form, apply the principle. Right? It's only God asking me to say yes, because God is everything. There is only the will of God. Any belief that I have to the contrary of that is the subject matter for my own forgiveness. Everything is the will of God. As above, so below. Anything that I think contrary to that is the subject matter for my own application of forgiveness. It's as simple as that. And if you've ever seen that movie Yes Man, with what's his name, Tom Hanks, Jim
Carrey.
Jim Carrey. That's an incredible movie. Right? He gets it in the end. He has a few hiccups along the way, but he gets it in the end. And his life just gets better and better through saying yes. He becomes more open, more included, more like he just can't believe that he's been saying no to things his whole life, because he felt by saying no, it allowed him to keep his little safety zone around himself, and nothing could hurt him. Right? So, yes, wow, and thank you. So, Anna, would you read this lesson for us? Oh, it's a shame Francois is gone, because I really wanted to talk to Francois the same thing. Like, dang nabbit, never mind. He'll probably watch this in retrospect.
You gave us this to do together too, so we could solve this lesson.
Yeah. Yeah, I wanted Francois to read this lesson. Or Kevin. Kevin and Francois have the same energetics at the moment going on in dichotomy to each other, like at either end of the spectrum. So this is a great lesson. So the rest of you guys, Anna's going to read this out aloud. The rest of you, close your eyes, take a few deep breaths, and try to listen to this lesson. Try to let it in without analysis of it. Try to let it in the same way that if you were sitting next to a Chinese couple having a conversation, you would hear their conversation, but you wouldn't really know what was going on, because it's only going to be your ego that tries to understand the lesson, right? But for the Christ in you, for that spark that God put there himself, this lesson is literally food for the soul. The Christ in you know what this lesson says already. Okay? It abides in you doing this. Yay! Read the lesson. I love this stuff. I love this book. I love this teaching. Okay? Take a few breaths. Close your eyes. Anna, when you're ready.
In my defenselessness, my safety lies. You who feel threatened by this changing world, its twists of fortune and its bitter jests, its brief relationships and all the gifts it merely lends to take away again, attend this lesson well. The world provides no safety. It is rooted in attack, and all its gifts of seeming safety are illusory deceptions. It attacks and then attacks again. No peace of mind is possible where danger threatens thus. The world gives rise but to defensiveness. For threat brings anger. Anger makes attack seem reasonable, honestly provoked, and righteous in the name of self-defense. Yet is defensiveness a double threat. For it attests to weakness and sets up a system of defense that cannot work. Now are the weak still further undermined. For there is treachery without and still a greater treachery within.
Read that last sentence again.
Now are the weak still further undermined. For there is treachery without and still a greater treachery within. The mind is now confused and knows not where to turn to find escape from its imaginings. It is as if a circle held it fast, wherein another circle bound it, and another in that one, until escape can no longer be hoped for.
Good.
It is as if a circle held it fast, wherein another circle bound it, and another in that one, until escape no longer can be hoped for nor obtained. Attack, defense, defense, attack becomes the circles of the hours and the days that bind the mind in heavy bands of steel, with iron overlaid, returning but to start again.
Stop for a second. So some of you guys know Annie, who does another Zoom thing. Right. This is how literal the course is. Right. Apart from all the experiences that it says you'll have if you're doing the workbook properly and everything like that, Annie went through a period of several years of feeling as if she was being constricted by iron bands. That's how she described it. As if she was being crushed. It was an emotional pain and a physical pain. And she couldn't control it and she couldn't stop it. I've had people who practice Eastern traditions, more yogic style passages of awakening, who tell me that, and a few people through the course who've had this, but who tell me that they feel as if they're burning inside. Like literally burning with a hot fire that they can't put out and they can't do anything about it. And one girl who I knew in Byron Bay who felt that burning literally took her own life because of it. She couldn't take it any longer. Annie went and got shock therapy, right, where they strap you down and put a bit between your mouth like a horse and hook you up to an electrical current. And I think that's the second or third time she's had shock therapy, right? So you'll come across these things and it seems like Jesus is just being quite dramatic and expressive and things about iron bands and whatever. And it's like, man, it's not. You know, if you're not in this for the total thing, if you're not in this for the whole process, it's like that old saying, don't fuck around with metaphysics. Because the process of healing, it's like, it is metaphysics. That's exactly what we're doing here. Right. I've also had many things occur that have been probably none worse than the dark night of the soul, but they've been inconvenient and I don't know. I don't even know how to describe them, but there was a stage I went through for years, for about 4 years, where I couldn't stand up. I would literally be walking along and it would feel like someone swept my legs out from under me and I would just collapse. And that would happen. We used to do a standing meditation. That would happen all the time in meditation. So when you come across these things that you read in the lessons, don't fob them off as dramatics or Jesus being particularly. It's like, take it on board totally, iron bands, and try to get a sense of that. Because to somebody who's going through a particular thing, and all of our undoings are different, right? We're all on the same journey, but the particulars, it's like in one life I've been the executioner and in another I've been the executed. You know, guilt and righteousness are the same bedfellows. But each of us is going to have to confront and to go through whatever the particulars of the release of the emotional states are. All healing is of the mind, but the body is a concoction of emotional packages. The body is a concoction of the effects of the mind, and the effects of thought are emotion. Keep reading, Anna. Read that bit with the iron bands again, please. That last, that's really cool.
Attack, defense, defense, attack become the circles of the hours and the days that bind the mind in heavy bands of steel with iron overlaid, returning but to start again. There seems to be no break nor ending in the ever-tightening grip of imprisonment upon the mind. Defenses are the costliest of all the prices which the ego would exact. In them lies madness in a form so grim that hope of sanity seems to be an idle dream beyond the possible. The sense of threat the world encourages is so much deeper and so far beyond the frenzy and intensity of which you can conceive that you have no idea of all the devastation it has wrought.
Right. Read that again. This is exactly what I'm talking about. You don't even know what's down there in the root cellar. You got this thing called the subconscious, and it is so dark. It is so grisly. Without the Holy Spirit, you would never go there. You would never venture to even peep at it.
Yeah.
So it's all illusion, but remember, you've given it all the meaning that it has. It's like a little child on the ghost train going around their first time they got their hands in front of their face because they've given it a meaning that it's going to be scary as hell. And they might have a little peep out and whatever, and they hear everybody laughing and maybe they feel it's okay to sort of have a look, and then after a few times around, they realize it's just rubber skeletons and white sheets with holes cut out and stuff like that. But you got to realize how much like children we are. We like to think that we're competent and mature and everything else like that. But when it comes to looking at our dark side, when it comes to looking at our fears, we're just like little kids. We don't want to do it. I don't want to go there. You chuck a tantrum. You throw yourself off a cliff rather than look at your fear. You know? That's why preparation, which is through the workbook and through, well, not just the workbook, but through your own efforts as well, but preparation for looking upon the face of God, man, that's, you can't even imagine it. It's enormous. This workbook that we're doing, these 365 lessons, when Jesus says it's just the beginning, he means it. It's just the beginning. This is just to get you in the right frame of mind so you can go forward. There's stuff, you know, like if you were to talk to any group of people, you go to an AA meeting, for example, and everybody's sharing their story, you may, before you go in, you may have hesitancy about sharing your story because you're thinking my story is so dark and ridiculous and horrible and just vulgar that I don't want anyone to know my story. And then you realize that everybody's story is the same. You hear about the carnage and the trail of destruction that has been left in the wake of people's lives who are addicted to alcohol as a way of coping with the existentiality that they feel. Keep reading, Anna. Read that bit again.
The sense of threat the world encourages is so much deeper and so far beyond the frenzy and intensity of which you can conceive that you have no idea of all the devastation it has wrought.
Yep.
You are its slave. You know not what you do in fear of it. You do not understand how much you have been made to sacrifice, who feels its iron grip upon your heart. You do not realize what you have done to sabotage the holy peace of God by your defensiveness. For you behold the Son of God as but a victim to attack by fantasies, by dreams, and by illusions he has made. Yet helpless in their presence, needful only of defense by still more fantasies and dreams by which illusions of his safety comfort him. Defenselessness is strength. It testifies to recognition of the Christ in you. Perhaps you will recall the Course maintains that choice is always made between his strength and your own weakness, seen apart from him. Defenselessness can never be attacked because it recognizes strength so great Defenselessness can never be attacked because it recognizes strength so great, attack is folly, or a silly game a tired child might play when he becomes too sleepy to remember what he wants. Defensiveness is weakness. It proclaims you have denied the Christ and come to fear his Father's anger. What can save you now from your delusion of an angry God whose fearful image you believe you see at work in all the evils of the world? What but illusions could defend you now, when it is but illusions which you fight? We will not play such childish games today, for our true purpose is to save the world, and we would not exchange for foolishness the endless joy our function offers us. We would not let our happiness slip by because a senseless fragment of a dream happened across our minds, and we mistook the figures in it for the Son of God, its tiny instant for eternity. That we need no defense because we are created unassailable, without all thought or wish or dream in which attack has any meaning. Now we cannot fear, for we have left all fearful thoughts behind. And in defenselessness we stand secure, serenely certain of our safety now, sure of salvation, sure we will fulfill our chosen purpose as our ministry extends its holy blessing through the world. Be still a moment, and in silence think how holy is your purpose. Be still a moment, and in silence think how holy is your purpose, how secure you rest, untouchable within its light. God's ministers have chosen that the truth be with them. Who is holier than they? Who could be sure that this happiness is fully guaranteed? And who could be more mightily protected? What defense could possibly be needed by the ones who are among the chosen ones of God by his election and their own as well? It is the function of God's ministers to help their brothers choose as they have done. God has elected all, but few have come to realize his will is but their own. And while you fail to teach what you have learned, salvation waits. And darkness holds the world in grim imprisonment. Nor will you learn that light has come to you and your escape has been accomplished. For you will not see the light until you offer it to all your brothers. For you will not see the light until you offer it to all your brothers. As they take it from your hands, so will you recognize it as your own. Salvation can be thought of as a game that happy children play. It was designed by one who loves his children and who would replace their fearful toys with joyous games, which teach them that the game of fear is gone. His game instructs in happiness because there is no loser. Everyone who plays must win, and in his winning is the gain to everyone insured. The game of fear is gladly laid aside when children come to see the benefit salvation brings. You who have played that you are lost to hope, abandoned by your father, left alone in terror in a fearful world, made mad by sin and guilt, be happy now. The game is over. Now a quiet time has come in which we put away the toys of guilt and lock our quaint and childish thoughts of sin forever from the pure and the holy minds of heaven's children and the Son of God. We pause but for a moment more to play our final happy game upon this earth. And then we go to take our rightful place where truth abides and games are meaningless. So is the story ended. Let this day bring the last chapter closer to the world, that everyone may learn the tale he reads of terrifying destiny, defeat of all his hopes, his pitiful defense against a vengeance he cannot escape, was but his own deluded fantasy. God's ministers have come to waken him from the dark dreams the story has evoked in his confused, bewildered memory of this distorted tale. God's Son can smile at last on learning that this is not true. Today we practice in a form we will maintain for quite a while. We will begin each day by giving our attention to the daily thought as long as possible. 5 minutes now becomes the least we give to preparation for a day in which salvation is the only goal we have. 10 would be better, 15 better still. And as distraction ceases to arise to turn us from our purpose, we will find that half an hour is too short a period to spend with God. Nor will we willingly give less at night in gratitude and joy. Each hour adds to our increasing peace as we remember to be faithful to the will we share with God. At times, perhaps a minute, even less, will be the most that we can offer as the hours stretch. Sometimes we will forget. At other times, the business of the world will close on us, and we will be unable to withdraw a little while and turn our thoughts to God. Yet, when we can, we will observe our trust as ministers of God in hourly remembrance of our mission and his love. And we will quietly sit by and wait on him and listen to his voice and learn what he would have us do the hour that is yet to come, while thanking him for all the gifts he has gave us in the one gone by. In time, with practice, you will never cease to think of him and hear his loving voice guiding your footsteps into quiet ways where you will walk in true defenselessness. For you will know that heaven goes with you. Nor would you keep your mind away from him a moment, even though your time is spent in offering salvation to the world. Think you he will not make this possible for you, who chose to carry out his plan for salvation of the world and yours? Today, our theme is our defenselessness. We clothe ourselves in it as we prepare to meet the day. We rise up strong in Christ and let our weakness disappear as we remember that His strength abides in us. We will remind ourselves that He remains beside us throughout the day and never leaves our We will remind ourselves that He remains beside us through the day and never leaves our weakness unsupported by His strength. We will call upon His strength each time we feel the threat of our defenses undermine our certainty of purpose. We will pause a moment as He tells us, I am here. Your practicing will now begin to take the earnestness of love to help you keep your mind from wandering from its intent. Be not afraid or timid. Tina, be not afraid or timid. There can be no doubt that you will reach your final goal. The ministers of God can never fail because the love and the strength and peace that shine from them to all their brothers come from Him. These are His gifts to you. Defenselessness is all you need to give Him in return. You lay aside but what was never real to look on Christ and see His sinlessness.
Good. So we're going to do a shorter one today. Joe and I are going to go and have some breakfast, and then we're going to the shenanigans, medieval shenanigans, down below for the opening ceremony. So homework. I don't usually give you guys homework, but it's in line with our course. So your homework is going to be defenselessness. And Tina, maybe you can pass this on to Francois. Okay. This week, an opportunity will arise for you to say yes to something, because God is always calling. If you are willing to say yes to the opportunity, it will take you into a new place outside of your comfort zone. And that is what you need. The temptation will be to want to defend yourself, to want to keep yourself safe and keep whatever the new thing or the perhaps it's a reoccurring thing coming around again in a different way, to keep it at bay. But I'm going to invite you to say yes. It's going to take a little bit of vigilance for that, because you may forget this lesson within even a few minutes once we turn the Zoom off. But okay, for each of you, this next week, let it be about stepping out of the comfort zone, saying yes to something else and not trying to control that. Just let yourself be led and just trust that it is God through the Holy Spirit doing the leading. Yes, wow, and thank you. Yes, wow, and thank you. You good with that, Joe? Group photo. Yes, wow, and thank you. It's going to bring stuff up. All right? It's going to bring stuff up. That's the whole point. You want it to bring stuff up. The time of sitting in denial is done. It's over. you're just going to rot away and, doing that. Fryer, fuck it. Yes. Do I have your yes for this week?
Yes. And I'm terrified.
Kevin?
Yes.
Good. Be terrified. Be terrified. Let it come up. That terror has to come up. See, you have it already. You already are sensing a sense of terror. Right? Now, stay in it. Right? That terror, it's like, that's the terror of the return to God. It's the terror of the love of God.
Yeah.
It's good. Let it come up. Draw your circle. Okay? Feel it to whatever capacity you can, to whatever depth you can go with it, and then be there one moment more. Trust the Holy Spirit. Okay? This is a journey of faith. Totally a journey of faith. And you walk with God wherever you go. So really there's nothing to be afraid of. There is nothing to be terrified about. But that doesn't mean you're not going to find it, because you've been living in illusion. An illusion of terror. All right, so I've got your yes. Kevin, do I have your yes? Very good. No comfort zones this week. Anna, yes. Tina and Shannon, yes. Very good.
Yes.
Very good. And me, yes. I think next week we'll do the stories of your yeses, because the stories of your yeses are testimony, right? Are testimony and witness to your own transformation. And that's as helpful as anything. Like it is the total help, really, to someone who's living in the darkness. It's like your own testimony of how you escaped. It's like we just read in that lesson. This is the story of your escape from the darkness to the light. So next week, each of you can tell your story. And if you can tell Francois the same, I really wished he was going to be here for that reading. But anyway, it's all perfect. It's all perfect. I'm going to go and have some breakfast, and we'll see what the day holds. I love you guys. I love you. I mean that with all my heart. It's like, man, the love is... I know this work and this workbook and the thing, and it's horrible, and we have to go through it, and it's this thing. But the grace that takes us through it, that's so beautiful, and like just being able to be together, and thank you. Look at Fryer, fuck it. Okay. Bran, I want to see if I can find a photograph for you on my phone. I'll probably send it to Tina, and she can post it in the group thing. Many, many years ago, my AA sponsor, Willem, he was a Dutchman, and I have a photograph of him in a big cathedral somewhere with his hands in the air like this. He's facing the wrong way. He's not facing the altar, but there's a whole bunch of people going on up there, and he just yells out, "Fuck it!" in the middle of this big cathedral. And I've got that moment captured on. It's really beautiful. Anyway, I thought that was funny.
That works. That works.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, love you guys.
Love you.
Peace. How do I get out of here? Oh, there.
How do I get out of this corset?
I'm sure you'll find some young knight in armor to do that.
Oh, from your lips to God's ears.
Hey, you can give it all the meaning that it has. Bye.
Thank you. Bye. Love you guys. Oh. Can't wait to see the group photo. Oh, he's gone.